Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the weekly sibling podcast to the popular classic car title. I'm this week's host, Jesse Billington, the staff writer, and I'm joined by our editor, David Simister, and our content editor, James Peen. Gentlemen, good afternoon, and how are you both?
I'm good, thanks, Jesse. It's been a very interesting week in classics, and obviously we are gearing up for Drive It Day, the big one this weekend. So more about that to come in this podcast.
Yeah, plenty more of that still to come. Mr. Peen, how are you?
All good, thanks. Just got the last news pages off, and sigh of relief. So on with the podcast.
Yeah, we've only got a few little bits to come together for this issue before we go to print on Monday, and that, as we've already mentioned, is our Drive It Day coverage, but more on that in due course. We'll kick off, as we usually do, with an Our Classics catch-up. Is there anything to report on either of your fronts, gents?
Only that I'm finding more things on my Mazda that are broken. So the moral of this particular story is that don't leave cars for months at a time over winter, because you come back to them and they're all seized up and not really wanting to do anything. And the latest one I found is my windscreen wiper needs replacing, which is not a biggie, but it's just another thing on the long list of things I need to do to sort my car out.
Is it the rubber blade that's perished, or is it like something more intricate, like the armature or the motor?
No, it's the rubber. It's the rubber on the actually touches the screen itself that's come away. So again, it's hardly anything to keep me awake at night, but it's just a pain in the bum when you got other things to be cracking on with on the car as well.
Yeah, just a problem. James, anything from your side? Beetle or the van?
Nothing on the Beetle front, but productive weekend just on the van. So got lots of filler work done, sanding and priming and top coat. So it's looking a little bit less shabby than it was. So I'm quite pleased with how that's turned out.
Excellent. And on the MG front, I can't remember where I last left off with this. We've got a crankshaft in that now spins freely. Managed to dial out the crankshaft end float issues that this engine was suffering as well. So finally been able to use all of the thrust washers that I've had sitting around for sort of months on end waiting to be used. So a lot of time spent with the feeler gauge and doing a bit of maths on a scrap of cardboard. So we've got that in. We've got a camshaft in. So the engine rebuild is all coming along nicely. And I spoke to a friend of mine at Moss earlier this week who is sending over plenty of parts for me. So thank you to him for putting together a special order, which should be here by Monday next week. So I can start grinding in some new valves and get the timing chain on, hopefully start getting things built up nicely. So it's all progressing properly at the moment. We will, however, not be out in it for Drive It Day, which was the original target. So Jimny for Drive It Day, and then hopefully mid-May the MG will be working. We'll wait and see.
I was going to admit, actually, my MX-5 will not be going up to the Lake District for Drive It Day. Not because it doesn't run, but because my wife said, "Oh, can we come with you as well?" And unfortunately, for keen students of sports cars, you will know that the MX-5 only has 2 seats, whereas I need 3.
Yeah, Mazda have been talking about the MX-5 recently. I think they've got sort of like either an update for the 4th gen or a 5th gen coming, and they've said that it's going to remain very true to the Mazda MX-5 platform. So chances are you still won't get that 4-seater MX-5 for your full family just yet, it seems. But that's modern car news, and that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is classic cars, and more importantly, classic cars that are missing their sort of classic status and exemption that comes with them.
So this is our lead story in this week's issue, and this is all to do with historic vehicle status. When your classic car reaches the grand old age of 40 years old, many of you will probably already be aware that you are entitled to put it on historic vehicle status with the DVLA, which means that while you still tax your car every year, you don't have to pay for it, which saves many hundreds of pounds a year. Certainly, I'm looking forward to doing that with my MX-5 and the Aventus when they get there. And the reason why it's so important is because it helps keep these cars on the road. Stops them from either being disappearing off and being broken up for spares, or languishing on people's drivers, encourages them to use them and to contribute to events and all those wonderful specialists to keep our sort of classic car hobby moving. But the latest figures that we've managed to obtain reveal that actually there are more than 100,000 cars that are old enough to have that status, but still that have never been put on it. So it's something that if you have a car that's over 40 years old, you've got to be able to go onto the DVLA's website, get the relevant details, and actually register your car for that status. It doesn't happen automatically. So there are more than 100,000 cars specifically which aren't getting that, and that means that the DVLA is still actually raking in many millions of pounds a year in vehicle excise duty revenue, which they, strictly speaking, don't need because it's an exempt class in terms of payments.
Yeah, a very interesting one. And do we know, possibly an interesting question that's just fired off in my brain, what's the oldest car that's sort of forgotten to be exempted, or do we not have that specific a detail?
So this is all to do with it. It's a very specific, it's a very general, piece of information. So it's any vehicle that is classed as private light goods, which is what cars are. If you're paying for a car, it will be PLG, private light goods, and it's, what we've asked for is those manufactured before a certain date, which is the cut-off point for taking your vehicle over to historic vehicle status. So what the DVLA won't give you necessarily is all of the individual details, but I would love to know if there are any pre-war cars out there or veterans who are still paying for their vehicle excise duty.
It would be an interesting one to find out if someone's still got sort of an old Austin A30 or something even older still that they're still sort of heading off to file the road tax for each year, which would be a bit of an annoyance because it's something they wouldn't have to do, obviously, if it pointed out.
Yeah, it's interesting because certainly for anyone who sort of followed the ups and downs of rolling tax exemption, it always used to be, but it was introduced originally back in the 90s. It was 25 years, and actually with the way that cars have evolved over time, I think a lot of cars that are sort of 20, just over 25 years old, including my car at home, are still in use as daily drivers because the build quality is better. If you think about it, in 1994, a 25-year-old car would have been something like a Hillman Avenger or something, which very few people would have still been using as daily drivers back then because most of them would have rusted away. But
Yeah,
the build quality is better now. Yeah.
James, you got anything on this one? I know you sort of put together a bit of the news section, but this was a story that David wrote.
I just think it's really important because it helps a lot of cars survive, doesn't it? Because if you're just in the banger status, you're going to slip through the net and you're going to, more cars are going to disappear off the road. Whereas if it's actually, a classic, bona fide classic, there's more reasons to keep it. You've got, makes more financial sense, isn't it, to keep something on the road that's actually going to be worth something in the future as a classic rather than just a slightly older car at the moment.
Yeah, and worth mentioning too as well, it's not just your annual vehicle excise duty that you'd be missing out on as well. With a lot of towns and cities across the country that are rolling out clean air zones, they will usually use the historic vehicles tax class as their basis for exempting you from those charges. So there's a very real chance, it's done town by town and city by city at the moment, but there's a very real chance that if you drive into Portsmouth or London or somewhere like that, if you haven't got your car in historic status, you may well get a bill through for going into a clean air emission zone as well. So that's another benefit for exempting your classic too.
Yeah, Bath, Bristol, Birmingham, quite a lot of major conurbations have got those these days. And I think it goes beyond just the financial aspect of this as well. It's also that sort of possibly adds to the mindset of it, of then sort of you have a certified classic and it encourages you out into the classic sphere with sort of the clubs and taking part in events and taking part in the things that really aid to preservation of not just your vehicles, but other vehicles that sort of form part of the hobby as well. So it's sort of almost the rite of passage paperwork for part of the community in a sense.
And it's interesting as well that this 40-year roll-off, obviously, which was introduced on a rolling basis about a decade or so ago, that is the status that the Treasury recognises as the when a car is eligible for these concessions. But actually the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs and FIVA, which is the big international organisation which looks after classics, they both recognise historic vehicles at the age of 30 onwards. And actually it's been a long-standing position that they would eventually like it to be that when your car reaches 30 years old, it gets those sort of concessions on tax and MOT and emission zones as well. And that would make a really big difference to helping to preserve those sort of slightly younger cars as well.
I think having that broader 30-year sort of acceptance would be a lot more important when it comes to sort of securing a lot more younger classics into this. When we speak about sort of certified classics, obviously one of the things that comes with owning a classic car is looking after it and restoring it. And we get the odd sort of fantastic restoration story coming through our pages. We've got an absolutely fantastic one that sits on 4.5 this week, which is a Ford Fiesta XR2 that has been subjected to a £100,000 restoration. And this boggles the mind because you used to be able to pick up sort of slightly scruffy XR2s for a couple of grand a piece and have a really fun sort of 80s hatchback to chuck around. But £100,000, how have we ended up in this situation?
I think it's
Well,
the
if you
fast
go
forward
off,
market, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
I was going to say, go on, David.
it's the fast forward market, isn't it? It is. Yeah, we've seen cars like this. They generate a lot of nostalgia, and certainly cars like particularly we've seen it with Capris in the past. Obviously we've seen it with Hot Escorts as well, Lotus Cortinas, and the reason why they have the amount of interest they do is because the number of people who really get really Lance and Jordan nostalgic about these cars. There are more of those enthusiasts out there than there are good survivors to satisfy that market, which is why prices have gone up, particularly over the last decade or so. And that's probably why this person has spent the price of an E-Type Jaguar restoring this hot hatch.
I mean, talking to Iconics about this story, they described it as undoubtedly one of the very best examples in existence. I mean, you kind of hope it would be for that sort of restoration cost, but I mean, we all know that when you work on a car, once you start to try and make something perfect, it's very hard to then put something on the car that's not perfect to match it. So I can kind of see how it's escalated to an extent, but 100k for an XR2, that's pretty mind-boggling.
I think that's it. If you want the absolute best, and it is, people will quite literally spend money, no object. And I know some of you who went to the NEC Classic Motor Show might have seen a Peugeot 205 GTI that was brought along by a restoration firm. And again, it was absolutely mind blowing how well it had been restored. And again, they were talking to me about how much it cost to restore, and again, it was a really big number. But people, if they really love those cars, and we have seen this before with sort of other cars. I remember we did a story in Classic Car Weekly a few years ago about a Triumph Herald that had been restored, and all the bills added up to £96,000. So again, it just shows it doesn't have to be a hot hatch or an E-Type Jaguar or a supercar to have that kind of money. If you really love that car and you want it to be the best in the world, for whatever reason, people will spend that money to make that happen.
It's one of those things as well, like Jesse, I mean, are you still keeping tabs on how much you've spent on the midget, or you just buried your head in the sand? So whatever it is, it is.
I do have a spreadsheet that keeps a track on exactly how much money I've poured into that car. In fact, I've got it open on a tab up here. I recently started setting up the same sort of spreadsheet for the Jimny as well. At the moment, from this point of buying the car, I've spent £3,788 on keeping it on the road and looking after it. So that's everything from sort of fuses to manuals to insurance to sort of the smallest of jobs to keep it on the road, right the way through to literally sort of, I think we were at £535 for getting the entire engine machined. So, and including 350 quid for the previous engine as well. So while I do have a track record for that money, again, it's something I try and avoid looking at too much because it is mildly terrifying. But it's one of those things of I can understand how it builds up. I think it's one of those things of it's just astonishing that that's how far it can build up as well.
And it's interesting because that kind of tells an interesting story about if you're in a position to buy these cars, it makes a lot more sense to buy something that's already had the work done than it does to buy a really shabby example and try and do it up, because the cost, especially since the pandemic, the cost of getting specialist labor in, that sort of thing, to do these things is absolutely rocketed. So to actually have a car, it's like I remember with my MGB. I remember this was, knocking on sort of about 8 or 9 years ago now. I got quoted by a specialist £19,000 to get it to restore to sort of tip-top MGB condition, and you could buy 3 or 4 really nice MGB GTs for that money. So that's why it makes sense if you're looking to buy a car, unless you really want to sort of spend every evening with the spanners out on your back in the garage. It makes a lot more sense actually to go and find one where someone's already done the hard work.
I think the market value is going to sort of keep a bit of a cap on it, because while people will spend that big money making the car absolutely perfect for their own enjoyment, there is a threshold to what the market will pay for that car. So from a buying perspective, this does present quite a bargain, really, because I think iconic auctioneers have said that they're sort of looking for 35 to 40,000 pounds, which is a huge saving over the work that's gone into the vehicle. So you could buy a very, very tidy Fiesta XR2 for, compared to its perceived value, not a lot.
I'll have to correct you there, Jesse. Actually, the estimate is 25 to 30, 25 to 30k. To give you a bit of perspective on that, so the absolute record for a Fiesta XR2 is just over 25 grand, which was at Mathewson's 2 years ago. But yeah, I mean, so if it went for that kind of money, that means it's still a quarter of what the car's restoration cost. But the thing I'd be interested to know from your point of view is, do we think it's going to go for more than that? Do you think it's going to go? Could it go for 30, 40, maybe even 50k? Who knows?
Well, to back up Jesse, I know he got his figures from reading the story, because it was Mr. Barnett, our auctions expert, who said he wouldn't be surprised if it was 35 to 40.
Absolutely,
so, yeah. Let's see what it goes for. The sky's the limit, really, isn't it? But whoever's selling it is going to take a bit of a bath on it, no doubt. But whoever gets it is going to get an absolute storming bargain.
Absolutely.
It's certainly one to keep an eye out for. And obviously, when we get the, is it selling at one of their major auctions, or is it just one of their online ones?
Yeah, it's selling at the so Iconic Auctioneers are selling this car at their Stywell Autodrome. It's a supercar fest sale, and 17th of May. There's lots of other interesting cars. It's a very good sale for sort of performance cars and modern classics in particular. And I know there's quite a lot of Ferraris in that sale too, because they have part of the sale in association with the Ferrari Owners Club. So it's a really interesting sale in terms of sort of gauging what's happening with the classic car market. But yeah, again, this we want to be keeping an eye on closely, because there's going to be a lot going on there.
I say importantly, then listeners and readers, I nearly combined that into listeners there, would be able to keep a track of what happens at this auction in the auctions pages of the upcoming issues of Classic Car Weekly. That's where I was aiming for with that one. They'll be able to see what happens.
The listeners will be able to find out what happens. Yes.
Listeners will be able to find out as it happens. I've accidentally coined a new phrase there. Meanwhile, while we're talking about things that are appearing in our news section, I'll flick back to pages 2 and 3, where, of course, we've got a new competition out where readers can join Classic Car Weekly on the London Brighton Classic Car Run this summer.
Yeah, that's going to be a great run. I know, Jesse, you've done it before in your MG Midget. I've done it in the MX-5 and my Reliant Scimitar. It's really good fun, and every single time. Obviously, we can't guarantee the weather, but every time we've done it, it's been glorious sunshine. We set off from Brooklands Museum, so you get a chance to look around there over a cuppa for breakfast. It's a really nice run, nice relaxed run through the South Downs. They usually organise a few stop-offs on the way, so you can chat to people, look at their classic cars as well. And then you arrive in Brighton on Madeira Drive, which is obviously the finishing point for the London to Brighton Veteran Car Run as well. And they have a really big classic car show at the end, and it's great because everyone's out there enjoying the sun. You get a really good variety of classics. We're going to be there too, because it's Classic Car Weekly are the media partners for the run, and we have a place to give away on that run. So we had some really interesting cars that CTW readers have brought along in the past. But if you want to be in a chance to win this particular event, have a look on our website, classiccarweekly.co.uk, and enter the competition. It's worth 130 quid if you want to join it. If you aren't looking, you don't manage to win that particular position, it's worth mentioning too that we have a discount as well. So you can go onto the event website, enter the code CTW10, you can get a 10% discount on the cost of entering as well. So well worth having a look. It's on the 1st of June. it should be a really good day out.
It is an absolutely fantastic run to do. I know the previous 2 times I've done it, it's been glorious weather, really. We've been absolutely blessed with what we've had when I've done it in the MG, and I did it last year with our managing editor, James Sadlier, in his Volkswagen Polo on the Modern Classics run. And they sort of alternate the routes each year, so you get a slightly different route, so it's never the same. And yeah, the car show that sort of builds along Madeira Drive is absolutely fantastic. And even if you're just in the area, it's always worth just sort of heading down to Madeira Drive to see what's attending. It's certainly a grand day out. Have you ever done it, James? I don't.
I've done many car shows in Brighton, but never done the London to Brighton one. I mean, I love it down there because it's park up on the seafront, see all the cars, bobble about on the beach. You got all the shops on the doorstep. It's one of those shows that it's got a bit of something for everybody, and the whole family can enjoy it.
So certainly worth attending to. A glowing series of reviews from us three. We'll move then to, this is just something that sort of occurred to me earlier this week. This is something that I'd spotted when I've been out and about. I'd spotted a car sitting on a forecourt, just a standard second-hand car forecourt, with written in the windows sort of all the details of the car, and it had petrol written on it, but in sort of inverted commas, as if to say it wasn't really petrol. And it just got me thinking that's possibly sort of the weirdest piece of car advertising ever. I don't know if any of you have seen anything that's truly baffled you when it comes to second-hand car adverts or truly terrible advertising.
What about new car adverts? Because
new car adverts, I will open it to that as well, because sometimes you do get an absolute stinker from the new car market.
I was going to say there was one in particular. It just I know we were talking about this earlier. There was one just immediately just pinged it back into my consciousness again, which considering it's a really revered classic car now, and I remember the advert for it at the time was absolutely dreadful. The Vauxhall VX220, the obviously Lotus Elise-based sports car. It's probably the best looking Vauxhall possibly ever. It's a really significant car. It helped to save the Lotus Elise as well. And I remember when it came out in the summer of 2000, I thought this was an absolutely glorious sports car. It's a chance for Vauxhall to really revamp its image. And what they did was they used that blooming Griff Rhys Jones in a pair of baggy wide fronts with a really abnormal voice like this, playing some sort of madcap scientist. And it killed the car stone dead. I just thought it was an absolutely terrible advert for this amazing car. When you think, what was it, a couple of years earlier, Ford had released the Puma, and they had this, I don't know if you remember the wonderful advert where they managed to digitally bring Steve McQueen back from the dead, and they had the 67 Mustang and the bike from The Great Escape, and he was driving around San Francisco, and it was an absolutely pitch perfect advert, which really made this, it made this Ford Fiesta based coupe into a much cooler car than it probably ever would have been originally. Vauxhall managed the opposite by having this absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful mid-engine sports car and then putting a beardy scientist in baggy wide fronts in it for their ad campaign.
That's certainly a contrast of adverts between Ford's brilliant one. I do remember seeing the Ford one probably sort of much after the Puma had left sale when I was a bit older, but I'll have to go and have a watch of the old VX220 advert, because that sounds like something quite atrocious indeed. James, you're a fan of browsing the classifieds. There's got to have been something that's jumped out to you for truly terrible advertising.
My bugbear is typos and ran when parked, all that sort of stuff. Or someone who says no low balls, I know what I have. That always winds me up. But I was going to say, I reckon that the Vauxhall ad team at the same time must have been the same people who came up with the Zafira advert, where they have those really northern children pretending to be old grown-ups. It was like,
now, that one I have seen.
How to make a car even more boring by having like little kids like ground down by life, drinking tea and deck chairs next to their new Vauxhall Zafira.
Wasn't it a double header? It was the Zafira and the Mariva that was in that one, wasn't it? Because at the end of it, they sort of set out little camp chairs at the back of it and sort of have a mug of tea while watching their sort of fictional family playing out. I remember that one being a bit strange. Perhaps there's something here on the fact that Vauxhall have just had an ongoing series of absolute duff adverts.
Well, the other one I remember, which was an absolute stinker of an advert, was it was a Rover advert, and I'm really sorry for anyone who's going to Pride of Longbridge tomorrow, because I still think this was probably part of the problem that Rover had in the early noughties. But they had this advert for the Rover 25, and they had left field playing in the background. They did it going around a roulette wheel and lots of pretty girls and all this, and it was totally the wrong image for that car. It should have been a car, something making out it was a really reassuring, solid buy. It was the Rover 25 is I always thought was a really good car, but it was just completely the wrong image in the advert.
They sold it to you on the idea of the Rover 25. It's a gamble, basically, with it on a roulette wheel.
Pretty much, actually, yeah. I'd never actually thought about that subliminal message before, but yeah, it's. I mean, I was thinking more it was trying to pitch it as being a much trendier car than it actually was, but come to think of it, actually, yeah, the whole subliminal message of buy Rover 25, it's a gamble. That's probably not a great shout, which is a shame because Rover were making some cracking cars at the time, and I just don't think the ad department were necessarily keeping up.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Dudley Moore film as well, Crazy People, where he's like the ad man who gets sort of locked away, and he comes up with the slogan for Volvo: "They're boxy but good." And like that's genius, and everyone thought, "Oh, that's amazing." Even now, I think Volvo's boxy but good.
Was that the same one where there was something about the Jaguar as well? Because I remember it being mentioned when Jaguar went through its rebrand earlier this year, and everyone went, "Oh, do you remember the Dudley Moore film?" And there was again something about Jaguar being mentioned in it for an advert. Again, I probably ought to brush up on my Dudley Moore filmography to sort of truly pin that one down. But it was again Jaguar's rebrand brought that one back to the fore. Sort of, I can't quite remember the actual angle for it, but it was again one of those things that you sort of go, I don't think you could get away with having that as an actual advert.
No, I mean, I also remember, you'll be way too young to remember this one, but in the 90s, when Audi was looking to sort of rebrand and look a little bit flasher, they had like a yuppie. He went into the showroom and he was like pinstriped suit, mobile phone. He goes out for
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and he's like the absolute. I reckon he's meant to be a BMW driver. He's one of those sorts. He's like, driving all over the road, gets out of the car, goes, "Nah, not my style, mate." But I think that's backfired because now that tends to be the sort of people who overtake you in an Audi on the motorway.
It's had a bit of an about turn. When it comes to Audi adverts, the only one that really stands out for me is I think I'm correct in getting the two models featured in it. It's an Audi R8, their mid-engine supercar, which gives birth to it's either a TT or an RS3. And it was a very strange advert, and it had a very short life on television before someone obviously complained about it, and it had to be pulled. But it was again one of those things that makes you go, well, that's quite an interesting concept, but I can see why all of a sudden you don't really want to think of your car being birthed in that sort of a sense. But it was a great way to sell the Audi R8 because they used the V10 in that one, and it sounded fantastic as it went through essentially the pains of labor by the sound of things. But yeah, the strange world of motoring advertising. But we'll touch on one final thing before we wrap up, which is, of course, we've already mentioned it at the head of the show. Drive It Day is this weekend, and we are all scattering to the four corners of the country, it seems, to head off to events. David, whereabouts is it you're off to?
I'm going to Dalemain, which is as far as I'm aware, it's the biggest Drive It Day meet in the north of England, held stone's throw from it's between Penrith and Ullswater. It's a lovely stately home, and they always they cover the lawn at the front of this stately home with classic cars from front to back. It's a really good meet, and you've got the A592, which is the mountain road that goes from Ullswater to Windermere, on your doorstep. So it's a really nice day out, and again, it's for me, it's probably one of my favourite events of the year. That one.
Excellent, James. You're heading off to the coast this weekend for Drive It Day.
Yeah, I'm doing the Crash Box and Classic Car Clubs meet again. Last year they were in Dawlish, which is a really lovely little venue, perfect seaside location. But they've moved to Teignmouth this year, so still looking forward to a nice drive down to the coast, fish and chips by the sea. Might take the family because the Beetle is now gone, so we'll be going in a slightly more reliable car, I imagine. But yeah, still looking forward to a nice day out, classics by the coast.
And Jesse, where are you pushing the midget to?
I will be hoping that I can magic some sort of midget-shaped apparition at the Bicester Heritage Scramble on Sunday. So I'll be there from its opening point all the way through the day, which is I absolutely love going to the scrambles and getting to do one for Drive It Day. There is always such a fantastic wealth of classics that show up for it as well. So it's a prime opportunity to head out, and always sells out very early on that one as well. But there are plenty of other choices when it comes to Drive It Day locations. In fact, there are 47 other ones listed in this week's Classic Car Weekly. If you check out the Out and About pages, there is a sort of essentially an oversized set of listings that have got plenty of choices and options if you're heading out for a run or just looking for somewhere to head off to enjoy Drive It Day on your ones. There are your sport for choice, really.
Yeah, it's a really important event. It's Britain's biggest single celebration of classics. There are events all over the country this Sunday. And don't forget as well that you can send us a picture as well. We have a really big Drive It Day issue going out next week, as we normally do. This one's going to be bigger than most because it's the 20th anniversary of Drive It Day this year. So if you're out with your classic car, it doesn't matter whether you're going to an event or not, or just popping down to the shops for a pint of milk, send us a picture with you and your car. Send it to us by email. It's at ctwdriveitday@gmail.com. We'll have a look at it, and we're going to put pictures from around the UK into our issue. It's going to be a cracker next Wednesday.
Of course, Drive It Day celebrates its 20th birthday this year as well, isn't it? So it's 2 decades of this is a fantastic event, and a little sneak preview of what's in next week's issue as well is, of course, we've got a celebration of those 20 years and how it's evolved and grown over those years.
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, the raise the events raise money for Childline as well, so it's a really valuable cause. So yeah, if you've obviously got a Drive It Day plaque, put it on the front of your car. If you haven't, buy one, and you get yourself down to an event as well. Help to raise money for good causes. It's going to be huge this weekend. The forecast is looking fantastic, and right from sort of the top of Scotland right down to the West Country to Norfolk, Northern Ireland, Wales. There's stuff happening everywhere. So have a look. If you haven't looked at our guide, have a look online. It's on the Drive It Day website, driveitday.co.uk. Make sure you get your classic car out and show it off to the great British public. That's what it's all about.
Getting out, getting it shown and getting it seen. It is a brilliant day, and especially because when there are so many classics out on the road, it's just such a feel-good factor, sort of being out in your classic, seeing others out and about and exchanging that cheery little wave, and so many sort of knowing nods from the members of the public as you go around as well. You can't help but feel that little bit sort of happier and smugger about things. But there we go. That is plenty to look forward to this weekend and of course in next week's issue. Otherwise, we'll be back in a few days with a new printed issue of Classic Car Weekly, as always, on Wednesdays, and hopefully a podcast following up with our stories from Drive It Day and a quick look behind the scenes of what we've all gotten up to. Otherwise, gents, thank you very much for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.
Nice one. No problem.
All right, and we'll go and finish wrapping up the last bits that we can get done for the future issue. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back with another edition of the Classic Car Weekly podcast.